I should be working on at least 2 other videos right now, but news of this new standalone game has had the old tinfoil hat working overtime. I need to get this out of my system before I can move on. So bear with me while I take you through one of the many ideas I've had around what this game could be based around, using the small amount of information we've received so far. This is following on from what I mentioned in the last video about the similarities the image showed to Ann Arbor in Michigan. Ann Arbor is a small city in the Midwestern state of Michigan. Home to the University of Michigan, it is known for its large-scale research and development programs. In the Division story, Ann Arbor has one of the last research facilities that is still operational on the Midwestern side of the United States. Due to its low population density, the city didn't appear to be hit as hard as other major centers by the dollar flu. And because of the college town's remote location, access to laboratories and technology, the JTF quickly locked down the area while scientists worked on a cure. It's more than likely that this is where Jessica Kandel ended up after the events of the Division 1. Those of you who have been following this channel for a while will be more than aware of APRIL KELLEHER's story. I've talked about her a lot. And as my wife keeps reminding me, I still haven't finished the final breakdown of the Broken Dawn novel portion of her story. I might get onto that soon, if anything, just to stop her from nagging me. But for those of you unfamiliar with her story, or needing a quick recap, I'll try and sum that up now. But I have a bunch of videos on her in the description, or better again, I highly recommend getting the New York Collapse and Broken Dawn books. She has by far the best story in the Division world, and it really gives you an idea of what it was like on the streets of New York and rural America during this time. April's story begins in New York City, where she lives with her husband. The same day that the Manhattan quarantine was put in place, she went to visit her husband at work, where she had to watch him from a distance, be gunned down in front of his office by unknown men dressed in black. Stuck on the island because of the quarantine, she roamed the area, not just trying to survive, but looking for clues on why her husband was murdered. Writing in a book she was gifted by her husband, called New York Collapse, a survival guide to urban catastrophe, she wrote down her thoughts and experiences. April talks about the state of the city and her confusion around his death. She also describes a number of different events where she had come into contact with Rikers and both Division and Rogue agents, including Aaron Keener. Over time, she witnessed a number of friends succumb to the events that occurred, as well as the virus. She goes into detail around the time that she too contracted an illness that resembled the dollar flu and survived. Eventually, April finds someone deep inside the dark zone by the name of Murch, who knows of her husband and what he was working on. He was responsible for his part in the development of a class of vaccines known as broad-spectrum antivirals, a type of vaccine that could help fight against all strains of the green poison. This work led him to being killed for his involvement by an unknown organization. Murch tells April that there is a lab in Ann Arbor that is currently working on the antivirals, and had worked with her husband. April decides to make her way to the lab, to take a look at what he'd given his life for. Outside of the major cities, April runs into a number of different groups, mostly just people doing their best to survive during this time, but she certainly ran into a few who were taking advantage of the current situation. And in one such situation, just outside Ann Arbor, she was rescued by SHD agent Ike Ronson from a group of criminals. When they made it to the city, they decided to rest before visiting the labs the next day. Camping out on a rooftop cafe, they were met by another SHD agent, Aurelio Diaz. The next day, the three of them visited the research facility and talked with the head researcher, who confirms that they have in fact been working on the broad-spectrum antivirals. It was during this time that Diaz received a call. It was revealed that Ronson has been working as a double agent for an organization called the Black Tusk. Ronson was a rogue agent. Although Diaz managed to subdue Ronson, it was too late. The cavalry was on its way. A full-scale Black Tusk attack was fast approaching the compound. April and Diaz leave him behind and manage to escape through a forest nearby. And this is where they part ways. April heads off to Washington DC to tell them of what she had witnessed, while Diaz decided to head east and do what he could to put a stop to this new invading force. So from this, what do we have? Civilians, doctors, scientists, laboratory workers, Black Tusk, agents, rogues, antivirals, and a free-to-play game. Now, let's be fair, free-to-play could mean any number of things. But if it is in fact based in Michigan, we have a few decent factors here that could make up a pretty fun game, with a solid story to back it up. I need to state right now that I've had absolutely no contact with the developers working on this, or anyone involved. Actually, now that I think of it, I don't think I've ever had a response from them. Oh well, what I'm trying to say is I have absolutely no inside knowledge of what's going on, and that what I'm about to talk about is simply my own ideas around what this game could be. With that out of the way, picture this. A Dark Zone, PvEVP, survival, last stand, zone control hybrid. Hear me out. We have a map of Ann Arbor, including some of the rural space around it, and although there is likely to be a number of smaller activities involved throughout, the overarching mission is to gain control of the city. There is the SHD agents, the Black Tusk, potentially the AI faction, and the rogues. They are all fighting for control of Ann Arbor, with the main research facility being located in the middle of the map. I probably need to bring up some visuals to better explain the craziness going on in my head. Apologies, I'm not hugely familiar with Ann Arbor's district zoning. This was just something I quickly threw together. In the centre, we have the research facility. Civilians are scattered throughout, as you'd expect, it's a city after all. Each of the factions have their own home location or starting point, an area that cannot be captured by the opposing factions. The area outside of these home locations are also generally assumed to be kept under control due to the faction influence or fear, and have support from the civilians located there, making it harder to lose or be captured by opposing factions. As factions get further away from their home locations, it gets more difficult and requires more effort and coordination to capture districts. Also, district control can be lost, not just by other factions, but due to the civilian occupation not being kept happy. This could be a short round-based battle or a long-term beast, where it takes considerable time to capture a district, with a potential ladder reset every now and then. This would be a game type where the PvP and PvE are just as important. Yes, you're coming up against opposing human players on one front, but equally, there is an NPC battle going on over the other side that needs to be kept in check. Plus, there are civilians in each district that need to be kept happy, or they will revolt. The centre of the map holds the overall goal, and although you can run into any uncontrolled district freely, when not under the control of your faction, the people here will be considerably more hostile towards you. On the other side, when travelling through an area under your faction's control, there will be support from the civilians and militia groups, as well as restocks and potentially vendors. However, gaining control of the regions around the central research facility will gain weapons and equipment and glory points for your faction at a greater rate than what could be acquired anywhere else on the map. This game mode would need to include a large number of players to do it justice, not just the usual 8 or 12 players. Or maybe Heartlands will just be another bloody battle royale. So this is all fairly unlikely to happen, but I still think it would be pretty cool. It's certainly something I'd be keen on playing. Well done if you've made it this far listening to me natter on about my random ideas. My wife was getting sick of hearing about them, so I had to tell someone. I have so many more, but I think I'll have to try and refrain from talking about them too much. Like my ideas around the mobile game, and how they could use augmented reality to create something a little more interesting than most of us are probably imagining they would produce. I should totally get into game development if I actually had any tangible skills to bring to the table. Okay, I'm rambling again. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!